all of your muscles except for your arms and putting them down to maintenance volume. The amount of volume you have to train your muscles if you just want to maintain them. You don't care if they grow because you'll grow them later. They're just not a priority right now. You just don't want them to shrink. Is something like, and I kid you not, 4 hard sets per muscle per week. You take 20 sets per week that you're doing for quads, go to 4. The shit falls down. You take chest, 4. Hamstrings, 4. Back, 4. And so on. Shoulders, 4. And all of a sudden, your systemic MRV is here. And if you're training arms normally, your sum of all muscles that you're doing volume-wise is below. That lets us get up to very high volumes only for the arms and get only their arms into the ideal growth range. That, my brothers and sisters in iron and steel, is how you get the biggest arms that you can. And you have everything at maintenance except for your forearms, your biceps, and your triceps. You are going to be having bigger arms if and only if you don't just train your arms regular, but you start at pretty high volumes and you end at very, very high volumes.
It's your lucky day. I've been only training arms with a little bit of leg training for the last 5 years of my life. Taking my arms from 15.5 inches up to 18.75 inches. And through this time, I can confirm that based on my personal experience, whatever that's worth, I don't have a PhD, so keep that in mind, that I was able to recover from ridiculously high amounts of volume.
This has led to more muscle gain than anything else that I've tried in the previous 10 plus years of working out, increasing the volume progressively, adding a couple sets each workout each week to the point now where I'm doing 40 sets of arms every day. Maybe it sounds a bit extreme, but your body adapts over time.
Because I'm not doing a lot of work, no direct work for my chest, back, shoulders, and I would say like comparable to maintenance volume for legs. 4 to 6 sets once every 5 days, and seeing some growth in the legs, taking them up from 22 inches to like 26.25, the most recent measurements. But overall, the majority of the fatigue, systemic fatigue coming from the arm training, allowed me to do really high volumes, up to 100 sets per week. And I would say that what I've seen is that scaling up the volume in this way that he's recommending does produce more growth in your arms from my practical experience, but I don't think it should be your primary mechanism of growth. The reason being is that what I saw is that, okay, I'm going to do 60 sets a week. I was in that sweet spot for a long time. 60 for bis, 60 for tris, which is a lot. And my body responded by growing some to, previously doing, let's say, maybe 10 to 15 to 20 working sets per each muscle. Ramping that up led to more growth. But when it seemed that I needed to sustain that amount of volume to continue to grow. If I drop that back down, I seem to go back to where I was before. And over time, what I realized is that although, yes, my body was able to recover from excessive amounts of volume, and it did temporarily seem to add to more growth, it didn't seem to stick around, which is very interesting, which you're not going to get from this theory that he's talking about, because it's all an idea, theoretically, right? So again, I'm not a PhD, I'm not an expert, but I've actually gone and indirectly applied this over 5 years, and this is what happened, okay? What I notice is that, yes, it does give you the ability to do that, and it will produce an increase in growth as I perceived it, measuring my arms, looking in the mirror, whatever. It's up to my own judgment. I'm not a perfect measure. I wasn't getting examined by scientists, but this is what appeared to be happening, that you'll lose that growth when you drop the volume back down. And what I've found over years of this is that you're better off, even if the muscle can sustain more volume, to pick a volume that you can actually sustain. So if you're going to do that program and you're going to keep doing 30, 40 plus sets of arm training per week forever, then okay, cool. But if you don't plan on keeping that up, then I don't actually think it's the best way to grow your arms. I think you're better off to choose an amount of volume that's adequate, 10 to 20 working sets per week, something like that, and then focus on progressing the weight that you can do with your arms, getting stronger with your arms. Having experienced it, having seen the results from ramping up the volume, and I've made videos on it where I'm like, look at this, I'm doing 40, 50 sets, 60 sets a week, and my arms are, I'm up to 17 and a half inches. They were 17 inches before. This is working. High volume's the way to go. But then the gains from it plateau out, and then if you decide to drop those sets off, I seem to lose some progress. And you can't continuously scale the volume forever either. So even in a best case scenario, maybe you are able to maintain most of those gains from that high volume period. If that's your main lever that you're pulling to see additional growth, and I did that. I took it to the maximum of like 100, and then you do start to experience more systemic fatigue, because although it is just the triceps and biceps, once you're doing 100 working sets a week, that's starting to have a big effect. And that's what I noticed. I was like, I can't. I'm like exhausted. I'm starting to bump up against my systemic, recovery capabilities, even though I'm just primarily training arms. And to grow further, I don't think I can do more sets, and now I'm kind of stuck again. Shifting eventually to going, okay, let me drop it back down to a more moderate amount of volume, and then focusing on getting stronger in those amount of sets that you do. I think you're better off to just keep the volume fixed. And something that he's not mentioning that in my personal experience has led to more of the growth than anything else is getting stronger in your arm movements and structuring your training to bias that. And to do that, in my opinion, using a faster explosive tempo at least some of the time is going to help to drive more strength. And mixing that with a slower, more controlled tempo to make sure you're getting all the benefits of a slow eccentric and a pause and in the stretch and all this stuff that science people say is going to make you huge. I'm not saying it's wrong. Let's combine the two. Let's do some fast explosive sets, and then let's do some slower, more controlled sets with a lighter weight so that we're getting the best of both worlds. I think this will produce the most growth. The faster explosive sets are not only going to allow you to immediately get stronger because you're moving the weight with more speed and momentum, but I found it led to drastically faster rate of progressive overload over time. Having done the slower controlled stuff for an extended period of time and not seeing nearly as fast of a rate of progress of being able to add reps and weight, switching to the faster explosive tempo from week to week, month to month, year to year, I was able to scale that weight up a lot. In the case of the triceps, doing the 140-pound dumbbell for 12 reps with a slightly faster explosive tempo, the 135-pound easy curl bar for 12 reps as well. Not perfect form, faster explosive tempo. Then doing some slower sets, get 8 reps with a more slowed controlled negative with the 140 for the triceps, 8 reps for the biceps with the 135 with more slow control, getting the best of both worlds, mixing those two things together. Also, something that I think Dr. Mike should have touched on, which he didn't, is rest times. To me, I've experimented with anywhere from 10-second rest times all the way up to 8-minute rest times in between your sets. And consistently, I noticed that using a longer rest time allowed me to see more growth. Why? Because it's more conducive to progressive overload. Because if I take a set to failure with my triceps and I only rest 2 minutes, that next set, a lot of the fatigue from the first set carries over. And then I lose a lot of my strength. So set 2, set 3, set 4, they're not nearly as productive as they could be in terms of the total number of weight and reps executed. Whereas if instead of a 2-minute rest time, I put a 4-minute rest time in there or a 5-minute rest time, each successive set, there's not as much fatigue. You're not getting as tired, right? Because you're spreading them out more. Over time, those types of workouts, experimenting with them and mixing in shorter rest times, higher volume, changing all these parameters while only training arms, and for triceps, only doing the overhead dumbbell tricep extension due to some injuries and limitations, I consistently noticed that when I saw arm growth was when I gained strength, and that was almost always associated with longer rest time, which allowed me to recuperate and recover more so that I could push the weight for more reps in the successive sets in the workout. So those are two elements that through my practical experience, I've seen to be very effective in the faster explosive tempo and the extended rest time. And now, if you're like, that's too long of a rest time, I don't have time, the superset structure to me is hands down the best. If you're prioritizing arm growth, you start with your triceps, do a bunch of warm-up sets, then push a set to failure, and then rest. I rest 5 minutes, but if you don't have enough time, just rest 3 minutes, okay? That's nothing that crazy. Change your song, if you actually push that set to failure, it's going to take a little bit to catch your breath, let your heart rate come back down, pick a good song for the next set, then go do your biceps all the way to failure, rest 3 minutes again. Triceps, 3-minute rest, biceps, 3-minute rest. That tricep muscle gets 3 minutes plus, let's say, the 30 seconds to do the bicep exercise. another 3 minutes, and then we're hitting a second set of triceps. So it's 3 plus 3 plus 30, 6.5 minutes of rest. But you don't have to just sit there for 6.5 minutes because you're doing your biceps, which aren't getting fatigued, the muscle itself, while, or your triceps aren't getting fatigued while you work your biceps, right? And your biceps don't get fatigued while you work your triceps. So you alternate back and forth. You can utilize a total longer rest time for each individual muscle without having to just sit there for 6 straight minutes not doing anything at all, which would be the case if you did straight sets of triceps. So to me, it's a no-brainer to, hone in on a couple exercises. I like Dr. Mike is saying, like, simplifying it and just handful of exercises, keep them consistent. I love that.
You just want to choose 3 total exercises. 3 exercises for triceps, 3 for biceps, and 3 for forearms. And you're going to run them Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
I think that's great advice in my opinion. And then track the progress and the reps and weight and chase additional reps and weight each time. And in my opinion, the extended rest time and using the superset structure for a fixed amount of volume, whether it be in each arm day, you do, 5 working sets, 10 working sets, somewhere in there, something like that. There's no exact perfect thing. You can experiment around. Doing less than 5 is probably leaving a little on the table. Doing more than 10, if you're hitting the arms 3 times a week, you might have trouble recovering from that. You might actually start to experience some systemic fatigue. Maybe not. Maybe you can go up. But again, if you enter into this world of the lever I'm going to use to see additional arm growth is scaling up the volume, you got to remember then that that's something that's hard to sustain. And eventually it does cause more systemic fatigue. Whereas if you look at scaling up the weight and the reps, is the lever I'm going to try to pull continuously to see more growth. I saw it to be more productive, like pound for pound. Adding an additional rep to a movement is more potent for muscle gain than adding a bunch more sets, in my opinion, from what I saw, experimenting with both. But also the focusing primarily on adding reps and weight instead of scaling up the volume is more sustainable. You can continue. The dumbbells get heavier. There's always more reps you could do. And you're not necessarily going to add crazy more amounts of systemic fatigue if for the biceps you were curling 60 pounds for 10 reps and then 2 years later you're curling 120 pounds for 10 reps. That set itself, you're still doing 10 reps with a heavier weight. Maybe there's a little more fatigue, but the total fatigue on your body is similar. So it's a more sustainable approach to continue to see growth.
If you want especially bigger arms relative to the rest of you, which you do, that's why you're watching this video, remember? You can take advantage of the massive, massive idea of short-term specialization. What the hell is that? Well, here's the thing. Most of your muscles have really high per muscle MRVs, maximum recoverable volumes, the total amount of work you can do for that muscle, and it still makes adaptations and still grows instead of goes, dude, I can't do this anymore. I'm overtrained. You're killing me. I'm actually going to get smaller. I'm going to get hurt. So any given muscle, you can train a ton. But your systemic MRV, your total body's ability to recover, is usually substantially more limited. And the bigger and stronger you get, the more limited it is. When people get bigger and stronger, they're typically able to handle something like 10-ish, maybe 15-ish, maybe 20 sets per muscle per week for their whole body. The local MRV for that muscle, if you don't have to worry about the system, is usually somewhere between 15 to 20 to 25 to 30. And if I'm being very transparent about the state of the scientific literature currently, I have to be frank and tell you, we actually haven't found a top-end reliable MRV for muscles.
Again, having done the excessive volume thing, it's just like, how long can you keep that up? And then how can you continue to scale that? So even if it gives you an extra half inch, well, if you only wanted an extra half inch on your arms, then great. The increased, and then you're content after that and you just go back down to maintenance volume. I think that this theory could be useful in that case. But if you want to try to add more than a half inch, an inch, a couple inches over years, then I think fixing your volume at a certain level, of 5 to 10 working sets per workout, something like that. And then just focusing on scaling up the weight by utilizing a superset structure and longer rest time, fast explosive tempo with some slower sets as well. I'm not gonna abandon the stretch, okay? Don't get all worked up. I'm not telling you that the eccentric is useless, but primarily for driving strength, I really think the attitude of chucking the weight around, having decent form for me has made a world of difference, which, I didn't think of that in the beginning. This is just something I stumbled upon, just continuing to hammer and continue to try to find ways to grow the arm. So I think the theory of what he's saying is very interesting and it's great. And I'm not saying I know more. I'm not a scientist with a PhD, but I have actually practically applied the theory that he's talking about over the last 5 years. And this is my practical experience with it, which I think you should consider as well. And it should be worth something too, because I think nowadays, there's a million different theories that you could come up with of what should happen or how this should work and that. And the science, the studies are saying this. And so he's a smart guy, Mike, and he's coming up with theory that should work, but he hasn't done, it doesn't seem like he's done that. And has he trained a whole bunch of clients specifically with this program, or is this something you just came up with that in theory should work based on some of the science and based on his expertise? It has value, but I just noticed consistently when you apply something in practice rigorously over many years, a lot of times the finding you'll get is different. And that's where all the information I share with you guys is just based off of my practical experience experimenting, and everybody's body is a little different. So you might not see the exact same result as me, but that's my take. I think it's actually one of the better videos I've seen from Dr. Mike. I enjoyed it. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll like some of the previous ones I've really pushed back. I don't really agree with that. And at the end of the day, it's just my opinion versus his opinion. And I don't have a PhD, as I've said, so a lot of people are going to think I'm just a meathead bro who doesn't know anything. But anyways, I encourage you to factor in my practical experience. Thanks for watching. And if you're trying to get some gigantic freaking piped out arenos, I do have my own arm course, which you can try, but you don't have to, man. Just hit a like, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Thanks for watching. Have a great freaking day. Peace.